Hello. Today we are dancing with Klaudia Rychlik, and I met you at Escohol. I was very fortunate to have you in my class, and I really been inspired by your work, and we've had many conversations, and we've been continuing to talk after you've graduated around what it means to do dance and to do teaching and to be with dance and to support people and the democracy of class and so many other things which I'm sure you will bring up. But what would you add, or what would you like to say about yourself?
First of all, hi, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to share my practice and my thoughts with you. So my name is Klaudia Rychlik, and I would describe myself as someone who is very interested in questions of learning together, being together, through movement, through correspondence, through conversations. And in more formal way, I would say that I have a background in dance pedagogy. I've did my bachelor's here at the Stockholm University of Arts, and I also have a master's degree in social anthropology that I did at the Stockholm University. And today I work as a dance teacher or dance pedagogue and a photographer as well. And whether it's working with movement or teaching or photography, it is all connected by this passion for capturing movement and eventually togetherness. Togetherness is definitely something that I'm really inspired by. And perhaps speaking of that, maybe I could tell you a little bit like why I'm so interested in those questions and how they came into your life. Yeah. So I've lived in many different places. Ever since I was a little kid, I moved around from different countries with my parents. I was born in South Africa, and then I moved to New Zealand, and then I moved to Poland, and then eventually around, I think it was 2006, that I moved to Sweden, and then I lived in different places in Sweden. And so quite early on, my worldview was challenged in the ways that, I needed to question why, or like how does my being with other people looks like. I remember like a first memory when I moved to Poland, where I think I was 5 years old, and I was trying to describe to one of my teachers that I wanted for her to bring me a towel. And then she asked me, what type of towel? And then I couldn't find the Polish word for purple. And, I was totally like clueless. I was like, why don't you understand, what I'm trying to explain to you? And I remember then, it really struck me. And I was like, oh, because I'm using another language. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved to Sweden, then again, it was like within the context of education, and it could be, reading about like a historic event, from a totally different angle. And I was like, oh, wow, this is, so I guess, that's when I started to get really interested and what it means to be in togetherness, what it means to coexist, what it means to have different perspectives on different events or ideas or experiences. So that's a very long story, but I think it's important to know, as what we're going to do today is very inspired, by my conversations with people, my being with different people, hearing their different stories, and my worldview being very challenged.
These practices, they sneak up on us in a way, and we end up working on the same thing over and over again because of how we've found ourselves where we are.
Yeah.
So where are we today? What are we doing today with you?
So what we are doing today is a practice that I before called Bodies in Togetherness. Today, I was thinking to maybe rename it to Moving in Togetherness, because eventually that's, what it's going to resolve around. So it's, we're going to try a score that is today in 4 parts. I wouldn't necessarily put it as if it's like a part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, but it's more like different ways to approach moving in togetherness, coexistence, being in togetherness. And so they don't have to come in a certain order. Today I have chosen a certain order just to, to have a starting point. And I was thinking that we can take one per one, so I will not say them all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So we can move in the presence of this score. But yeah, maybe I can tell at least the first part.
Definitely.
So as I say, this practice is about like speculating or exploring togetherness and how it relates to movement. And in the first part of the score, what we are going to do is to explore different ways to relate to each other and to move in togetherness. So in this step, we will focus on multiple ways of approaching it. So it could be that first you focus on relating to each other by using your sight. Or it could be using your hearing or acknowledging the distance between us. Everything that you put in your mind into. And usually when I'm leading this score, I'm usually telling people to switch. But since we're gonna both do it today, I'm just introducing the idea of switching between different modes of relating.
Great. So we're going to be moving in togetherness in different ways, through different ways of relating to each other to start with. And it can be sight, distance, sound. Yeah, however we find and allow for like a switch to occur so that we can really find these different approaches.
Exactly. And in this part, I think it's also interesting to have this perspective of challenging your pathways. So it could be challenging to relate through maybe hearing if it's not, your first choice.
Great. Right, I think we're ready. So let's pause and we do...
For 10 minutes.
Great. Great, so we are back after finding different ways to relate to each other. Now, what do we do?
Yes. Now we take maybe 10 seconds to recollect or like to gather maybe some words or experiences. And then we spare them for later. Now we will dive into the second part, which is that we continue exploring and speculating on what it means to respond and to be and move in togetherness, to relate to each other, but now with a specific focus on letting go. And what I mean by letting go is letting go of your pre-assumptions of what is meant to happen in this very moment. Maybe I don't need to tell so much more. Then maybe dive into the practice of whatever you're doing and to give it time and attention. Yes.
Okay, so just to recap, we should maybe take 10 seconds just to collect some words.
Yes.
And then we will dive straight in and let go a little bit so that we can be with the practice even more.
Yes. And letting go will mean different things for each and one of us, but that's okay. That's the purpose. So whatever it means to you, you explore.
Okay, great. So we will pause and come back, and you can do the same. Okay, so now we have collected a few words, and then we let go a little within the practice. What next?
Next is reflection. So what we are going to talk about is the questions that appeared during moving and doing it together.
Great.
Yes. So perhaps before we share, we could take half a minute, just to write down keywords, and then we will reflect.
Awesome. So I'm going to pause. We will take half a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll talk.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've taken our minute or half a minute. Now we're just going to talk. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. What questions did appear, or thoughts or ideas?
I have to think about what is movement and what is to be with movement, and to share in the movement of a space, and what is allowed. Like what, maybe not allowed, but like what is possible.
Yeah.
Like I can move all the way over here, I can move really close. And then in the second thing we did, I found that it felt more like we were just hanging out, and any sort of control or like taboos that I had before, they were like, doesn't matter, like there was no pressure. And it was interesting maybe thinking of it in relation to like when I used to play as a child, and how like maybe in the first one felt a bit more like that, because you're trying to understand like, what's the game, what are we playing, what are the rules, can I do this, can I do that, like there's a strong engagement. Whereas in the second one felt like we're so used to playing together that we just hang out now, and I'm not doing those social things of trying to understand what I can do and what I can't do. I felt my experience was quite similar, also in the sense that, you know, in the first one I was more driven by curiosity in the terms of figuring out how I could push my assumptions of how I could relate to your dance and to you and to your movement. Whereas in the second part, it was more about letting go of trying to figure out or like to enrich my vocabulary, but more to be open to surrendering to whatever is there, instead of, you know, figuring out plan forward or being 5 steps ahead, but rather to be more attentive to whatever is there. Whereas the first one was more me trying to find as many ways as possible and being like, oh, let's try this, but what if I do this? Whatever happens to our responsiveness, or am I copying, am I listening, am I responding, what am I doing? And the other one was, you know, just being more surrendering to whatever is. There's such a strong thing of what is this person doing, and how am I involved in it, and how do I continue with it and play with it. And I think in the first one I can be a bit more like, oh, okay, so it also has to do with shape, for instance.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, I can do these shapes, I can do these shapes. Or what about these shapes? And like figuring it out. Whereas in the second, it's like, oh yeah, cool, you're doing shapes. I'm here. I can do it. I don't have to do it. Like there's sort of more of a looseness to the proposal.
Yeah. For me, letting go is such a tricky, or which is very inspired by my journey, moving around and eventually coming to a place where I had to, learn different ways of letting go, because eventually you're not in control with whatever is happening around you. And even if you are to a certain point, that you kind of need to find ways of coping, with letting go. And I realized in today, doing this practice with you, that I have a hard time sometimes I'm really attached to my idea of who I am and what my dance is and what my role is, and it was really nice to get challenged within that, because I kind of eventually realized that even if I let go, it doesn't mean that I lose it forever. It might, but because it was a certain point when I was like, oh, I want to try this, and then you propose something different, and I was like, well, I guess I have to let go of it, because I don't have to, but at this moment I was like, oh, but this is super interesting, let's do it. Yeah. And then minutes later, the thing that I was thinking that we're gonna do it just appeared.
Yeah. And there's something about like, because it's funny because you, in a way, you introduce a structure and then we let go of the structure.
Yeah.
And there's something about trying to identify one's values within the structure. So, okay, these are the things I think we should be doing in togetherness. And then we let go, and I'm challenged, exactly as you say, by like around what I think it is. And then within the space of being challenged and refiguring, like, and letting go, I start to notice like, oh, it's not necessarily about the sound or like those values that I think are core to me. It's even hard to describe what the values are, let alone describe like what is being let go and what is remaining. It's very physical and very like practiced in a way. It's really beautiful.
It's also so funny because that's why I love doing this, and I also add reflection as another dimension of exploring this. But I think that some things about togetherness are almost impossible to, not impossible, but I think you kind of have to experience it through movement. And that's why sometimes it's so hard to talk about it, because I felt it and I know it with my body, but then it's super hard for me to verbalize whatever, what happened.
And yet there's something really important about that sort of like attempting.
Yeah.
The same with like we attempt to create a structure or to make proposals of like, this is what it means to be together, through listening, through touch, through proximity, through hearing. Hearing is listening, or seeing, like through vision. And then we break it down by letting go a little bit and seeing the things that are also included, which maybe we don't necessarily go to immediately. And then there's a practice of trying to word, what are we doing and how is it happening? And like through it all, it's like you're circling around the same thing and recognizing how the words are needed in order to continue. But it also presents, like, if we stay with, say, just movement perhaps, or if we stay with just the structure, or we stay with just the words, we lose the possibility to understand fully what is happening.
Yeah. Now when I'm thinking maybe we could use the metaphor of seatbelts.
Yeah.
Or like this idea of certainty. So you have the seatbelts when you drive the car because it keeps you safe, and it's very concrete, way to keep you safe.
Yeah.
In case something happens.
Yeah.
But then eventually you need to, let go of it if you want to grow, if you want to go out of the car,
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess it's like this fun play with being certain in order to put it into questioning, because it's really hard to let go if you're not really sure or like have experienced what you are letting go of. And
Absolutely.
to acknowledge that, okay, maybe I'm doing a certain form all the time because before I've experienced it in my previous education, or this is my previous idea of movement is. It is when you kind of acknowledge that you have this seatbelt on that you can actually unzip it.
Yes. And there's something about like Jonathan Burrows says this in his Choreographer's Handbook of maybe it's not dance that you need to express what you're trying to express. And I think there is something about the creative process, and within dance as much as maybe any other creative process, where we can too easily use the techniques and use what we know, the methods that we know, sort of thing, and not actually touch the reason why we're doing the thing in the first place. And like by asking that question of like, is it dance that you need to do to express what you're trying to express, we can better get closer to how we can do it, or what we can include as dance in our dance to be able to do it. And it feels like, and it's interesting that you have this togetherness as like a anchor, or as a theme, or as a directive for us to attend to, which is, it's not necessary. It doesn't have to be dance to be together, or togetherness doesn't have to be dance. And we could be doing togetherness in many different ways.
Yeah.
However, it provides maybe something to return to because we are going to be together, regardless of like what we want to do. As long as we're in a free association and we've chosen to actually be together. But then the question is, in what way and how? And I feel like through the different modalities of just approaching, and you did call it that at the beginning, like different approaching being together, we get to know better on what is necessary for us to actually spend time together. And because I can imagine this can, or I was just going to say this can turn to talking whilst we're actually still talking. So we're still also being together whilst we're talking.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Togetherness is such a big concept, and it's so interesting to approach it from different angles. In this practice, I'm specifically interested in the idea of learning and being with, and how we get to know each other. How can we grow together? How can we move to a place that we wouldn't be possible to move into if we wouldn't be in this togetherness? I think it's also so beautiful to talk about the different modalities, the different approaches, because it kind of widens your idea what could be included within togetherness. Because I've met this perspective of that togetherness is, or the aim of togetherness is to come into this type of unizone, or we have to agree, we have to have a common understanding or something. And I think what I have realized throughout my life, being in conversation with different people with different backgrounds and experiences and talking different languages, I think it's so beautiful, this almost like a clash of perspectives and coming to a point where we don't need to come to an answer. It's just, talking about this stuff just to get your mind into different pathways and maybe sparking a new idea or challenging your own idea of yourself and your world or your movement or your dance. Or I think it was super beautiful to do both parts, and they gave me a little bit different approach to it. And I think it's so nice to use them as, like, I could go back and forth between those two parts, endlessly, because the first part gives you the small nuances, the second part gives you the friction. And then if you would go back to noticing after the friction, you would see some type of transformative practice. And it's so interesting.
Yeah, and it's like the thing that we're working on of this togetherness is between us, and we're both contributing and adapting to what it could be. And it's that like continuous conversation. Like sometimes what I have to think about, how does change happen? How do things become transformative?
Yeah.
And it's like the conditions for change are out of all of our control. Like they are the ground from which change sort of emerges. It needs to be that things are set up in a certain way so that we can shift maybe. But then how do we dialogue with that? And it must be something of both feeling seen and being included and having ourselves in it, and at the same time being able to adapt to all the other voices and so on, and recognizing which parts are contributing of what we're contributing with and which parts are not. And like in teaching, which you do yourself, I notice how much of teaching is about what we don't teach rather than what we do teach. And I think it's the same perhaps when we're learning. It's about what we unlearn as much as what we gain. It's a practice of like supporting and understanding, and that must continue forever, because how could we ever become static? Then there would be nothing to be with, in a way.
Exactly. I definitely think that difference or corresponding with each other through the lens of difference, it is the momentum of life. That's how we continue. And I think it's super important, speaking about support that you mentioned, because letting go is really scary. And it's for myself, I think letting go is much harder if you don't feel like you have the system of support. Because letting go, as I said earlier, it's sometimes for me it's almost personal, like I'm letting go of myself, kind of lose the control of the situation, or
and you can let go of too much, and then feel super violated. For me it's so tricky to know when to let go. What is something that I need to fight for, that I need to set boundaries so nobody makes me to let go of it, or to let go of things or ideas or attachments that don't serve me anymore. It's a little bit about understanding, isn't it, in some way, like trying to gain greater experience around what constitutes being togetherness, or a situation, or ourselves even. And by passing through these different modalities of being with those questions and those materialities that sort of support that, we can better get an understanding, and then hopefully have greater control over exactly when we share something and when we feel like, no, I'm not ready to share this, or I'm not ready to let go of this, perhaps, or understand what it is. Yeah.
Exactly, because I feel like, before I was a little bit uncareful with the idea of care, because I spoke a lot about, you have to approach this from the place of curiosity, which is interwoven with the idea of care. But, we have spoken about this earlier, but care could be tricky in itself, because care is not always, it could be violent as well. And I think, as you say, to protecting your what you're letting go of, even if it's in the space of, like we are taking care of each other, this is a support system, it still doesn't mean that, I'm gonna get pushed into letting go of something that I don't want to let go of.
Or it's also aspects of what we're letting go of. Sometimes you can't let go of it all, because there's parts of it that you need to identify that need to remain. And then it's other parts that need to be changed. Shall we?
Yes. We shall go on to the next one. So this is the last part. So the reflection was a part of this practice. And just to make it even more clear, I think I said it in the beginning, but just to remind, is that these parts should not be seen as part 1, 2, or 3. It's just, what I am currently most interested within exploring togetherness. And the last part is I'm really interested in play and celebration, appreciation or pleasure. And within this part, I want to invite play through no hesitation. So just going for whatever is happening and be very straightforward with it.
Sort of direct.
Very direct, yes. So in this part, just to make it more clear, maybe we do not work so much with compromise, but we do it with care. But what I mean that we don't work with compromise is that we don't back off from what we want to do.
Great.
Yes.
That makes complete sense. So play, celebrate, appreciate, feel pleasure.
Yeah.
Don't hesitate.
Yes.
Great. Let's do that, and we'll be back in a minute. Okay, great. Wow. Thank you so much, Claudia. This was really good. Maybe if you have some last reflections, we can share them now of the whole structure. I feel so tingly and sort of stretched and leaned and moved, socially, conceptually. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I had to think about leadership and following, or that sort of traditional thing of leading and following, and an improvisation of who's leading and following. And I had to think about the role of a teacher and the role of a student. Yeah. And so often the student is continually doing the following thing. Yeah. And the more we play with student-led learning, the teacher is also following the student. Yeah. And there's this sort of strangeness that we all know from those types of practices where we're not sure who's leading and who's following anymore. And there's this type of hesitation or reluctance to act, maybe. You don't want to lead, I should let you go first, and waiting for the response and stuff. But was there any what do you think of that? And also, do you have any last reflections?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the reason for why I said no hesitation.
Yeah.
Because I feel that it produces this very fun and playful quality of not second guessing yourself and not trying to think of what other people need, but rather to focus on what your needs are, and through that you give space to other people to act. I really do believe in that within the context of teaching, for instance, because if I'm usually pretty clear that whatever, I cannot really teach people anything. What I can do is to share my experience and to be blunt about, like, okay, this is what I feel, this is what I want us to try, but you are eventually the one that needs to find the pathway to knowledge. And for that to happen, I think it's important not to censor whatever is happening within you.
Yeah.
And not to judge it, just to go for it. And oftentimes I feel like the process of learning is put in a way that you are afraid of saying something wrong or doing something wrong, or you think that, you know, you have to let people talk first and then you have to reflect and come with a perfect answer or perfect response or whatever. And I think that I think it's a more fun way to be like, oh, I don't know what that was, but here it is. Because then you can work on it, and then you can also find out more about yourself or discover parts of yourself that you were not aware of. I felt that very strongly in this last part. I almost felt like a little kid again.
Yes.
I was super playful and very like happy, and I just got this realization that being in togetherness is so much about the gifts.
Yeah.
Like gifting whatever you have as your, you know, some people may put it as a like, this is my gift, or this is my purpose, or this is whatever. But I think eventually, you know, it's just like, I think it's all of that plus also like your experience or like whatever you've been through. And it's so beautiful to be like, here you go.
Yeah.
Just, you know, share it and then be open to receive it. And so it's like this constant push and pull between being responsive but also gifting, sharing, and being open within this whole mishmash.
Yeah, it's almost like when we're in together, when we're in togetherness, we are a society. Yeah. We already are these things, and so much of education, so much of what we do is towards getting a career or contributing to society, producing something. And it's like to recognize that we are always gifting, and there are many gifts that can't be streamlined and articulated through the institutions that form society, and to allow for these spaces which are so much more playful and free and allowing, because even in an education which should be sort of blue sky, go and experiment and discover what you like, so often we are tailoring our trajectory towards getting a job, and not recognizing that we already have a lot of gifts to give. Yes.
And we are, in my opinion, way too focused on measuring and way too focused on being effective, whatever that means, for like that we kind of try to measure our progress. I'm always skeptical towards the idea of progress, because what is that really? You know, I rather talk about sustainability. So how can I maintain my creativity? How can I maintain my interests? How can I maintain my curiosity? How can I play with, you know, just exploring how I can be a more attentive and careful listener. And eventually, what, as you said, I mean, togetherness is society, and you know, even if we do go get a job, we don't, I mean, we are in togetherness all the time. So I'm surprised that we don't practice it as a thing.
Yeah.
I think it's super fun to do.
I'm so glad we've got to meet and to meet again like this, to meet in the dance studio, to meet around your ideas. And I'm so happy that other people get to meet these things as well, and that we can be in this together. But if people want to know more about you and get to know you, more than the gift that you have given of being in togetherness, go to places, be with others, and receive and give gifts, as many as you can give all the time. How can they get to know you more?
Probably my social media, or just write to me through social media and we can talk. And it's my name and my last name. So my name and my surname.
Great. I'll write it in the description of the episode. Thank you so much. What a gift.
So much. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to be together with you.
Yeah, same. Thank you.